Hey listeners, Christina here. Before we get started, a note on our content. This podcast centers on the history of beauty and fashion, and as such, we often discuss fat phobia, diet culture, and weight loss. Detailed content warnings can be found in the episode description. Links to any photos we discussed during the episode can be found in the show notes, or you can head on over to our Instagram at VanityVeritasPod. Also, this is an adult show featuring adult themes and language, so bear that in mind if you choose to listen. An extra warning for this episode contains explicit conversations around surgery, anatomy, and general body horror. Prepare yourself accordingly. All right, let's get into it.
I had a breast type where going braless with a sheer top would have looked straight up pornographic.
Yeah.
It would not have been admissible.
And that's the thing, right? Whose nipples are admissible, whose are allowed.
Your nipples are not admissible.
Welcome to Vanity Veritas, where three vain friends dive into the history of beauty, fashion, and culture, trying to figure out how we got here and why we care so damn much. We're your hosts, Chelsea Feltman,
Elizabeth Urbanzik,
and Christina Cole-Geddes.
In each episode, one of us will present a topic related to historical fads, fashion icons, and beauty standards in an attempt to connect the past with the present, always asking ourselves, does anything ever really change?
Today, we have a very titillating episode that I cannot wait to hear about. Elizabeth, do you want to take it away?
Oh boy, howdy do I. In this episode, gang, I would like to talk about boobs.
Woo!
Yes, breasts, titties, or if Instagram reels about old Dutch slang are to be believed, meat pairs.
Was that not the greatest meme I've ever found?
Sensational. And to be clear, MEAT-PEARS. So you have a PAIR of PEARs made of MEAT, meat pairs. There we go. All right. So friends, we all have a relationship with breasts, truly. Regardless of gender or sexuality, we either have them or we want to spend time with them, or we nursed from them, we obtained them, we reduced them, we removed them, we were surprised with how they changed our bodies due to hormones or pregnancy. Maybe they're associated with trauma or illness, but regardless, we all have a relationship to these standard secondary sex characteristics. And additionally, due to their visibility in our culture, we all have opinions about them, what we should do with them, what they should look like, how much we should see of them, who should have them, what they're for, and importantly, who they're for. Now, there's a history wide and vast regarding boobies. So, because truly, as long as there have been humans, there have been breasts. So I had to nail down exactly what I wanted us to examine about them today. And I kept coming back to the thesis of our podcast: vanity. The history of beauty standards, what inspires them, who tries to adhere to them, and why. And as we say in our intro, does anything ever really change? In the case of boobs, no. And so we are going to focus particularly on the 20th century, because otherwise this would be a it would be its own podcast. Because by the 20th century, at least in the Western world, breasts are objects of sexual desire. This is something that didn't quite take off until the Renaissance. But at the same time, women are starting to see an increasing amount of agency in the economy and in politics and in their personal lives. The 20th century is when we see massive changes in fashion due to either restriction during wartime or abundance during post-war time, or new technology of synthetic fabrics and more women getting higher education, entering the workforce. These are all going to be ways that we reshape our silhouettes. But the 20th century also will see the rise of cosmetic surgery. And this, my friends, is where we're really going into the deep dive vanity of it all. A common theme in this podcast has already been and will continue to be perceived effortlessness. Women, in particular, are expected to meet modern beauty standards, however, are repeatedly shamed or punished if their effort is considered cheating or is in any way even visible or ostentatious. Additionally, another common theme of our podcast is, what are we willing to endure in order to meet said beauty standards? And when it comes to titties, again, the answer is a lot. What we will also explore, yeah, exactly. What we will also explore is the wide variety of opinions regarding folks who have had gone under the knife. Full disclosure, myself included, to change their breasts for a myriad of reasons. And this is the moment where, oh my goodness, we have so much in common.
We have so much to talk about.
The moments where Chelsea and I learn fun things about each other. Yay!
You know what's fun there is I knew. And I got to watch that happen.
Oh, fantastic. I love that. Now, I know I said we're going to focus on the 20th century, but I do want to take the briefest of time machines back to the 1400s to discuss one of history's greatest titty advocates, and that is Agnes Sorel.
Yes! Yay! My queen!
Now, see, I knew. I already know that Agnes Sorel is a favorite historical figure of Christina's. Christina, would you be able to give us like a quick Cliff's Notes on who Agnes Sorel was and why you know so much about her?
I surely can. Agnes Sorel, she is the very first mistress of the king. She is Charles VII's mistress. She's the first woman to get a title of this effect. So prior to this, if you were the mistress of the king, that was just like someone who was, side piece of the royals.
Just good for you.
Yeah, good for you. Agnes Sorel actually gets a title, which comes with essentially a paycheck, a house, a stipend, so on and so forth. She is alive between 1422 and 1450. And probably the most important fact that you're looking for here, Elizabeth, is that Agnes Sorel, as mistress of the king, is frequently depicted and talked about as having one full titty out, if not both breasts. She is described this way in several paintings. Historians aren't 100% sure if that is completely true or just conjecture. But what we do know for sure is the fashion she enjoyed was having, at the very least, her nipples out. And in theory, she preferred her left boobie. Is that good?
Yes, great. We all have a favorite.
Yeah.
We all have a
mine's
favorite.
my right, obviously. When you're breastfeeding, they call it the stud and the dud.
No.
Yeah.
Oh my God. The one that produces and the one that's like, hey, look,
Yeah,
a strawberry. Look, a strawberry. That's one of my favorite memes right now on TikTok is the look, a strawberry. God. It's so funny to me. Thank you for that. There are a lot of images of her with one tit out. And in fact, I'm going to share one with you now.
Which one? I can't wait.
It's probably the most famous one of her.
As Mary?
So I have just dropped it into our group chat. If you want to open up that link. Who would like to talk about what it is we're looking at here?
Ooh, may I?
Please, Chelsea.
Go for it, Chelsea.
Okay. We're looking at a woman wearing a gorgeous crown of pearls and maybe rubies. She's holding a baby who is a perfect example of like a freaky looking Renaissance baby.
A Renaissance Jesus, actually.
Pre-Renaissance, like this is 1400s.
Freaky looking medieval
1400s.
Yeah,
sorry,
medieval baby.
Yes. And she's very pale, she's like alabaster skin. She's looking down at her freaky baby, and she's wearing this blue dress with like a lace-up bodice in the front, and one of her breasts is fully out, just fully hanging out, just fully like pointed forward, fembot style.
Real apple boobie too.
Really like, round. They're both
round.
Like perfect spheres. They're I have to say, I'm surprised at how far apart they are.
Yeah, they look like implants when you first get them. They look the way implants do when they are first put in. They are so round and hard,
almost
and
like
so
a free floating sphere under the skin.
Like when you're a little girl and you put in tennis balls under your t-shirt, or anyone.
Very much the look. I mean, it's definitely an improvement from like the Byzantine Mary and Child iconography where her boob is basically coming out of her clavicle.
Yeah.
It just kind of looks like a goiter or something. So like, to be fair, her breasts are sort of in the right spot. But yes, thank you so much for all of that description of this alabaster lady. For anybody playing at home, this is Virgin and Child Surrounded by Angels, which is a depiction of Sorel by Jean Fouquet or Fouquet. I don't speak French. I don't know what to tell you.
Chelsea?
It's probably Fouquet. Is there how's it spelled?
Fouquet.
I would say Fouquet.
Fouquet, Jean Fouquet. Look it up at your leisure. Don't look it up at work. At NSFW. They are also surrounded by shiny red and blue cherubs that are horrifying. They're just like devil babies and little blue babies.
They really do look demonic.
Yeah, it's a very strange painting, but very 1400s. So that's our dear friend Agnes.
Can I quick say? A scandala. It was very scandalous that they painted the mistress as Mary feeding Jesus.
I was going to ask because that seems like a very bold statement.
Controversial. And supposedly she really did have one boobie out, by the way, at court. But that also is like, historians have real varied opinions of like, was that something negative or was it like subversive? But she definitely at least had a nipple out at all times. We know that for a fact.
Yeah, she just liked having a boob out, and apparently that took off amongst the court. And yeah, it was as scandalous as like Melania Trump showing up topless to a Trump rally. Like it is weird. Like it's weird for somebody to just have like a tit out. Now, in her book, The History of the Breast, which was an incredibly useful resource for this episode, historian Marilyn Yalom argues that this painting marks a turning point in how the Western world viewed breasts and would set off a trend of breasts no longer being seen solely for nursing babies, or in the case of those paintings of Mary nursing the baby Jesus, as something sacred, but now as objects of sexual desire. Now, Agnes is not going to be the focus of this episode, but I think that she's a really fun jumping off point because it shows us that throughout history, breasts haven't always been universally erotic. They're not even currently universally erotic. There are still cultures, especially like indigenous cultures in hot climates where women often don't wear anything over their breasts, where they consider it kind of amusing that breasts would be seen as anything sexual or something that you would like interact with during sex or foreplay. Breasts are inherently feminine traits. Who has them, what they look like, and how they are exposed or covered up are really big conversations. But the breast as something that is desirable, as something that is sexual and therefore subject to scandal and taboo, that began during the Renaissance and now is really central to its relation to being an inherent part of our beauty standards in the US especially. I would like to share with you a poem.
Oh, we love a poem.
Okay. This is a poem called Les Beaux Tétons, or The Beautiful Breast, by Clement Marot. Try not to get too horny, all right? It's pretty intense. A little ball of ivory, in the middle of which sits a strawberry or a cherry. Guys, it's really serious. Don't laugh. It's really serious. It's 1535 erotica. When one sees you, many men feel the desire within their hands to touch you and to hold you, but one must satisfy oneself with being near you for my life, or another desire will come. For every reason, happy is he who will fill you with milk, turning the virgin's breast into the breast of a beautiful, complete woman.
No!
That took a turn.
You just want to knock her up? That's the sexiest titty is a milky titty. Let me tell you, as the one person here who has been a breastfeeding person, not sexy.
Well, it's funny you say that because starting in the 1500s, we start to see this ideal breast shape in art. All of us are big fans of art museums and classical painting in general. We have seen that ideal breast shape, those little apples. They are perky. They are relatively small. This was the sexy desired breast shape. It denoted youth and vitality. But those last couple lines are particularly hypocritical because during the Renaissance, it was actually preferred for French upper-class mothers to hand their babies over to a wet nurse. This is a quote from, or rather a passage from The History of the Breast by Marilyn Yalom. Husbands often favored the use of a wet nurse since it was believed that couples should refrain from sexual intercourse while the mother was nursing, which is funny because also while you're nursing, I believe it's like a natural.
You can't get pregnant, right?
You can't get pregnant. Yeah, it's like
not,
kind of.
Hey, wait. Disclaimer for anyone on here: you can. That's not totally true.
But it's like less likely.
It's less likely. Everyone use protection to your heart's desire.
All right, so here's one of my favorite parts. It was widely thought that a mother's milk was a form of vaginal blood, transformed from blood to milk as it passed from the womb to the breasts. They're mystified. I mean, this is also a time where they thought the uterus just like bounced around the body on strings.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So, to continue, the agitation of intercourse would have the consequences of corrupting the milk supply, curdling the milk, and might even kill off any fetuses that managed to be conceived. As for the aesthetics of breastfeeding, many husbands did not like the appearance of their wives with a child at the breast. Nursing, a praiseworthy occupation for ancient Greek goddesses and the Virgin Mary, was not considered attractive when practiced by high-born ladies. She continues, caught between the doctors who ordered them to breastfeed and their husbands who ordered them to do otherwise, many upper-class mothers in Renaissance France declined to nurse their young. In a century when the erotic potential of the breast began to obscure its maternal function, many ladies were simply not willing to devote themselves fully to their babies at the expense of the relations with their husbands, not to mention their lovers. Yeah. By the way, I just want to make sure, quick note, this is by no means a judgment about breastfeeding in the current day and age. We're all very fed is best.
Can I have a real quick moment with this?
Please, 100%. I was hoping you would.
I have a young child. I did breastfeed. I hated it. I will go on record to anyone who will ask me that I did not enjoy it. I slogged through it for 8 months. And honestly, some people love it. Fed is best, 100%. Whatever is good for you and like your mental health as a parent, please do that. I really recommend it as long as your child's being fed in any way possible. But the only thought I had about this was that we love the idea of pregnant women impregnating women, like this very, full of your seed kind of imagery. We hate mothers. As soon as someone becomes a mother, we find them unattractive. And like any signaling that they would actually be a real mother, like, you know what I mean? The idea that suddenly once they start feeding from your own body, which is part of the biological function. Shenanigans that happen postpartum, which is one of many, like we suddenly are like, no, we don't want that. We don't actually want to see you be a mother. We just want to fill you with our seed and know that the spawn is there. Like that makes me nuts.
And there's something to it about going from being proof of someone's virility, because then you still for some reason like are like, I don't want to say owned by, but kind of like your attention is towards the man who impregnated you. And then all of a sudden there's a little pipsqueak that needs to be kept alive. And all of a sudden all your attention goes to this person and the breast is no longer something sexy and full. It becomes something utilitarian. And yeah, there is something in that switch that is so obvious in this passage, right?
Yeah. I just side note on this, like, I'm sorry, I could talk for fucking years about the insanity that is pregnancy and postpartum. Like, that's a whole other episode. But I just want to say the reason this really burns my toast is there was just a very large study that came out about how literally male DNA that impregnates you lives in your body and can permanently change your own DNA. Like, my DNA will permanently have my husband's markers on it because I carried his child. So the idea that like I have physically altered my DNA permanently, like my child as a fetus passed it into me and changed me like I'm a fucking dinosaur in Jurassic Park. And then the minute I feed them, they're like, ew. Fuck you. Fuck you, patriarchy.
I've never heard a better excuse for exclusively having sex with women. Like that that sounds like a good option. All right. So we are seeing this transformation and these early beauty standards that women are willing to sacrifice for in regards to their breasts' attractiveness to men and to the world at large. Now, I think we'll probably talk about this later, but I want to point out the inherent power imbalance for women up until extremely recently. There is a lot to be said about beauty standards throughout history, but I think intrinsic to that conversation is women's incredibly limited options economically and politically until like the latter half of the 20th century. If your marriage is your security, should we judge what women are willing to try to stay young and beautiful and therefore keep their marriage intact?
Yeah, I mean, I think in many respects, securing a marriage or, a position as the king's mistress or what have you, the mistress of someone powerful, it's a career move.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just a romantic thing. And I think we all realize that marriage is this romantic idea is very, very modern. And in some ways, in many places in the world, is still not how it's primarily viewed. So, we talk about like, doing everything you can to advance yourself professionally, like dress for the job you want, for lack of a better word. So like, why? Yeah, I don't think we should blame or cast judgment on any of these people for, trying to position themselves for basically job security.
100%. There was a plastic surgeon or a sociologist at some point during the 80s who said something along the lines of, there are very few men that think that their wife is going to leave them for a smoother skinned man. That's sort of just not the vibe. And we see that a lot, especially with the mistresses of the French court. Both Christina and I have a bit of just a love for French
Deep
mistresses. But it's true. They'll have a whole bunch of babies for the king. And then all of a sudden they start to sag and they're like, oh, I can get a new mistress now. That was very much, it was a very important position within the court.
And didn't some of them get like set up with pensions and households when they were retired?
Yeah,
like, honestly, I think like that's how it should. Good for them. That's how it should be.
There are worse ways.
Please ship me off to a chateau somewhere. Put me out to pasture with a fucking Beaujolais. I'm in.
Mwah. All right, gang, we are going to fast forward significantly to the early 1900s. If anybody would like a rundown in breasts and fashion throughout that era, I highly recommend dress historian Abby Cox's video, 500 Years of Women's Corset Stays and Bras. She gives a 30-minute crash course in how like necklines and bust shapes change from the Tudor period to the current day. We're going to go to the 1920s. We spent some time discussing the Gibson girl. She's got that curvaceous figure, small waist, that really full, very pronounced pigeon bust. It's not even like two boobs. It's just like a great big pigeon chest. In the 1920s, that silhouette changes. Now the fashion is straight, no curves, flat as a pancake. This is a very post-war sentiment. Women are gaining more autonomy and freedom, pushing back against that incredibly stiff, corseted look of their Victorian mothers. Side note, this is one of my favorite elements in the Downton Abbey series. As somebody who's watched Downton Abbey too many times, it's my comfort show. It's my office.
My best day with Elizabeth was we had martinis and we went and saw the Downton Abbey movie and laughed so hard.
I love the Downton Abbey movies. They're so bad.
The movies are so bad.
They feel like getting a lobotomy like on a tropical island with like a Mai Tai in my hand. Like
they're making a third one.
I know. I have it's saved in my calendar, ladies.
Should I fly out? Should we all go see it?
Yes.
100%. We all need to go see what is going to be a horrible third Downton Abbey movie. Because I'm just like, guys, read the room. I'm going to eat it up. Like, we're dealing with a huge wealth disparity crisis around the world. Let's go watch the perils of rich people. I'm just like,
but they're really nice to their servants. You guys.
So kind. They're like family.
Exactly. But it is one of my favorite things. If you go back and watch the series, like from the beginning through to not the movies, it's kind of like Sex and the City. It's like canon ends at the end of the series. And then like we kind of care about the movies.
Oh, that's so true.
But the switch, like one of the things that I really love that they explored in that series was this change from late Victorian to Edwardian to post-war 1920s and then into the 1930s. Because not only does the fashion change, but because the family has 3 daughters and it's all about how women's, options change in this era for a very specific, family and social class. But we see what that struggle is. But I love seeing how they're out of their corsets. They're starting to wear looser garments. They're starting to work, like all that kind of stuff. So great way to sort of explore how that fashion changes. Now, dress historian Nicole Rudolph, who also has a great YouTube channel, makes the great point that straight, boyish figure of the 1920s didn't come naturally to all women. Obviously. She mentions that so many contemporary women who love historic dress count themselves out of the 1920s because they, quote, don't have the body for it. And this idea of I don't have the body for it is a very late 20th century idea when corsets, girdles, and shapewear give way to our body image being more about what our body actually looks like, right? Our physical fitness. But obviously, bodies were just as diverse in the 1920s, so undergarments were invented to help women achieve that shape. We go from a very strict corset with boning to the girdle because all of a sudden synthetic fabrics arrive and elastic. So you have the girdle to smooth out your shape rather than giving you a specific structure. It's to smooth out your natural body, right? Think of Spanx or Skims. Not every woman contemporarily has a naturally flat tummy or a little nipped in waist or a big full butt. So undergarments are created to help women achieve this contemporary beauty standard of a lifted, curvy backside and a slender waist. I'm going to send you another couple of images of what I think is a really great example of this shift in the body of one incredible icon of the 20s and 30s, and that is Mae West. The first one is in the 20s, and the next one is in the 30s. We notice a bit of a shift, don't we?
I would say two big shifts.
Ayo. Listeners, in the first image, Mae West is in a sort of higher necked, very slim gown. She's positioned so her body is facing the side, so we're getting her profile. She's almost completely flat chested. It looks like she's bound almost.
Yeah, she looks like kind of like corseted in there.
But not corseted in a way where you're getting any kind of, like bust. It looks like she's tried to flatten her chest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's almost like she's wearing a binder. Like it looks like this. And this was a part of 1920s fashion, was the bandeau bra, right? This idea of trying to be as flat as possible. We did not want that curvaceous shape. That was not seen as stylish. So now compare that to the image of Mae West we all know when she really became a star, which was the 1930s, when we get to see her curvaceous frame and she starts showing cleavage. Her breasts become much more a part of her look. Everything she wears is low cut, very bodycon, sometimes see-through and sheer. Like she becomes the vamp of the 1930s that we all know her for. But you can see this huge shift happen, like this vamp of the 1930s in the 1920s. We know she does not have the body for 20s fashion, but she is making it work with what she's wearing and with her shapewear. Right.
And listeners, the second image is the classic image of her. It's really low cut around the bust. Her two breasts are up quite high. They're large. They're pushed together. Like there's a very clear sense of cleavage.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So again, the history of shapewear could fill an entire episode, but my point is this. Women throughout history are looking for options to meet specific beauty standards, whether they be pert and perky, non-nursing boobies, or the flat, curve-free frame of the 20s silhouette. They're wearing bandeau bras to smush their boobs flat. They're investing in girdles that smooth out their bodies to eliminate their curves so that these straight, flowy styles of the day look flattering on their bodies. All of us have squeezed into shapewear or put on a push-up bra to alter the way our body looks in certain clothes of the era. This is not unique. It is not confined to a certain era. But in the 20th century, a new option emerges, and that is cosmetic surgery. Friends, let's talk about breast augmentation. So, early attempts at enlarging the breasts include
Christina and I both have
yikes,
anticipatory grimaces on our face.
Big yikes coming.
Paraffin injections. These are a no-go. You're basically injecting petroleum into your body. The complications are worse than whatever it was they were trying to alter. Other strange attempts include ivory, glass balls, ox cartilage, and wool.
Both Chelsea and I just heard our ox cartilage. I was like, well.
Like of the collection of things I've mentioned.
Of the options given, I feel like that one makes the most sense.
We still use bovine tissues.
Yes, I was going to say, you can get a cow heart, a pig heart implanted into, ox boobies.
Ox boobies.
I'd like the ox boobies, please.
How's the ox boot? How are they prepared? Are they gluten-free? So next up is something called autologous fat transplantation, which is basically taking fatty tissue from another part of your body, like your ass or your tummy, and transplanting it into the breast. Now, the problem here is that the fat just sort of naturally liquefies and then your body reabsorbs the fat, but not like evenly or consistently. So you can end up with really weird shaped boobs. And there's also a lot of scarring wherever the donation site is. I'm totally dating myself here, but this method only makes me think about the episode of Ren and Stimpy, where Stimpy donates his ass fat so that Ren can have massive pecs at the beach.
I buried that memory.
In my opinion, there are two kinds of elder millennials. People who watch Ren and Stimpy and thought it was funny, and people who are lame. And I am the former. I fucking loved Ren and Stimpy growing up. It was one of my favorite shows. But that, like, it is the one, I think it's like the most famous episode of that series is the ass fat to pectoral muscles transplant. Hey, listeners, this is Elizabeth from the editing chair. I just wanted to make a quick clarification that I forgot to mention in the episode. So there is still such a thing as fat transfer breast augmentation, and it's actually pretty successful. What doctors do is they will use liposuction to pull fat cells out of your body. They run it through a centrifuge to separate the fat cells from everything else, and then they inject it into your breast. And it's apparently pretty effective. You can get about half to a full cup size. It does act like the rest of your fat in your body. So if you lose weight or gain weight, it sort of, deals with that. You can still have asymmetry from it. It has a few of the same complications as the original version, but it is still apparently a pretty effective breast augmentation option. That's pretty cool. However, in the original one that we were just talking about, there is definitely an element of like a skin graft, an actual like part of your skin from the donation site that would have gone to your breast tissue. So I just sort of wanted to make that clarification before this next bit we tell. Okay, everybody, back to the episode. Also, this is actually a very similar method to that of a phalloplasty. That is the gender-affirming surgery to construct a penis for trans men. And the donation site is often from their forearm or their thigh.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I have definitely seen a TikTok of a trans guy sort of like prepping for a phalloplasty, but he's covered in tattoos and he has to be like, all right, which one of you is coming on a new journey with me?
What a fun assignment that would be.
Right? Just like which forearm tattoo is now going to be a very new part of new important part of my anatomy. Fantastic. So moving on, in the 1940s, doctors would prescribe estrogen for breast growth, ironically also part of gender affirming care for trans women. But it's important to know at the time, merely having small breasts wasn't seen as a problem that justified medical intervention. Plastic surgery existed, but there was still a pretty stark difference in this era between plastic surgery, which was seen as a way to reconstruct what was lost due to injury or illness, and cosmetic or what was called beauty surgery, which was considered to be solely about vanity. Breast reduction was actually considered much the way it is today. It was pretty common, and it was seen as a medical necessity because of how painful they can be, and also as a psychological handicap. This also considers how they're a physical hindrance for women who are trying to lead a more active lifestyle. I have never met a woman who has had breast reduction surgery who has regretted it. They've always said it's the best decision they've ever made. Chelsea, is that where you're coming from?
Yes.
Fantastic.
And I also don't regret it. And I'm also thinking about getting it done again.
Really? Even smaller?
I feel like I didn't go far enough. And also as I've aged, they've like come down, they've changed. So it's something that I had such honestly a great experience at when I had it done as a teenager that I would do it again. And I might. Yeah.
People close to me who are like, didn't get it done until they were in their 50s or 60s are like, I wish I'd done it 30 years ago.
I have had the same conversation. Wish I'd had it done years ago.
Exactly. Yeah. Now, there was an article in McCall's in 1948 that said, women with small infantile breasts do not suffer much physical or psychological discomfort. These conscientious surgeons have neither time nor sympathy for vanity and vague longing for a beautiful body. I wish I could fully do the voice of the reporter from A League of Their Own. Mr. Harvey, just like your chocolate bars, you're completely nuts. Like, that's the voice I hear it in. Just like that.
Absolutely.
The women's daily like opinion.
Can we talk about the vague longing for a beautiful body? Because
that's
same.
Yeah.
That's the life of all women, are vague longing for a beautiful body.
I also just want to comment as the small boobied person here, that it took me like decades to love my small 70s boobs, and then I loved them, and then I had a baby and I had knockers and I hated them. And I am so happy to have my small boobies back. But it is just proof that like we are constantly at this war with what is the ideal body for us. And we like you always want what you don't have. And it takes so long to have self-acceptance, and then something changes because we're always changing. So you know what? Fuck all these people.
That is actually the perfect segue, because one of the books that I read in prepping for this episode is called Tits Up: What Sex Workers, Milk Bankers, Plastic Surgeons, Bra Designers, and Witches Tell Us About Breasts. And it's written by the sociologist named Sarah Thornton.
Witches?
And witches. Yes.
Aces.
But she is somebody who had a double mastectomy because of some irregular cells, and then got reconstructive surgery and found herself really at odds with these new implants. So she sort of explores this dichotomy that is a major theme in the history of plastic surgery, even up to the present day. This judgment call between implants that are justified and implants that are just vanity. Because she points out that when it comes to restorative breast augmentation, that's a misnomer. No part of that surgery restores the primary function of the breast, which is lactation. Reconstruction or implants after a mastectomy or a breast reduction for chronic back pain actually reduces or completely removes the ability to lactate. And in that sense, breast implants are more similar to a glass eye than an artificial limb. It's about aesthetics either way. It's totally fine. But it's about looking normal. Right? Quote unquote normal. So this lack of sympathy for small-breasted women starts to shift in the 1950s. Would either of you like to wager a guess as to why this opinion starts to shift? Would you like to name me some 1950s icons?
Marilyn Monroe.
Mm-hmm.
Jane Mansfield.
Mm-hmm.
That's Jamie Lee Curtis's mom. I couldn't get there. Oh no, Jane
Mariska Hargitay's mom.
Mariska Hargitay's mom.
Who's Janet Leigh?
Janet Leigh.
We have Dior's new look in the late 40s, early 50s. It's all about this return to this very decorative, curvy silhouette.
A very hourglass shape, right?
Mm-hmm. And also, guess who made her debut in the toy aisle in 1959?
Barbie.
Yeah. So the shapes are just changing. Just like in the 20s and 30s, the shapes are changing in this post-war era. Yes, Christina?
Can I just say really fast, who's that fabulous British doctor who talks about Victorian sex all the time? Anyway, please someone place her name in. I love her.
Elizabeth here from the editing chair again. It's Dr. Kate Lister.
But she did a whole thing about how the Barbie doll was actually just this German sex doll that you could get as like a joke. And then they basically like ripped her off and brought her in, and they were like, you're a wholesome lady now. I just think about that all the time, that like she is meant to be sexualized. I'm not anti-Barbie, to be clear. I mean, mixed feelings all around, but like that is a hoot.
Yeah, she was seen as vulgar when she first came out because they were like, wait, what? Dolls are supposed to be baby dolls.
Yeah.
They're not supposed to be aspirational, this is what I can see myself as in the future kind of dolls. So yes, this demand for breast implants solely to enlarge small breasts skyrockets, and doctors start catering to that demand. Would anyone like to guess what city this takes off in?
Los Angeles?
Correct. It is Los Angeles. It is Los Angeles, California.
I am a native Angelino, listeners, and I am both not surprised and take slight offense.
But it's all about Hollywood, right? Like all of these ladies coming to Hollywood, trying to make it in Hollywood, or women just being like, it's an industry town, baby. Like you're surrounded by these beautiful people. So arguments for breast reduction or reconstruction were often about not only their physical hindrances, but also their psychological effect as well. The feeling of being or looking abnormal. Now, the arguments that plastic surgeons make for breast implants for small breasted women start to use the psychology card as well, considering these new beauty standards of the decade. You read the term term inferiority complex a lot in these sources. Either way, the rhetoric always comes back to self-confidence. Surgeons and patients and advocates of this kind of surgery are always saying that basically having small boobs affects women psychologically, making them feel depressed and self-conscious, which then justifies their decision to improve their self-confidence with surgery. So we are constantly, like, we always have to justify it. We always have to justify it either psychologically or anything else. I will say that in my particular case, listeners, I have silicone breast implants. I got them when I was 22. And the reason that I got them done is because the way that I developed naturally was very asymmetrically. My breast sort of tapped out at a large C and a small A. That's what I was working with. And so it may be incredibly self-conscious, as it would, even though no two breasts are sisters, not twins. But when they are fucking stepsisters, it can really cause a lot of, it really made me very self-conscious. And it was something that I had planned to do for a very long time and finally got them done when I was 22. Still to this day, one of the best decisions I ever made. But I've always sort of, like, I don't think of it this way, but I know other people have. They're like, oh, well, you were correcting, you were reconstructing, you were fixing. I'm like, there's nothing wrong with just wanting your boobs to be bigger.
Right. And it's so interesting to me because when you said that, I was like, oh, of course. Like, I'm sure your insurance covered it. I'm sure it was considered a medical necessity. No?
Sure wasn't. Nope.
No. That's
not.
wild.
No, it is not covered by insurance if it's just aesthetic.
Wow.
I had no medical, like, I couldn't point to any chronic back pain. I could only point to chronic self-confidence issues.
You couldn't lie and just limp to one side.
Right? Just like, I just like weighted down on my left, like, no, I couldn't possibly.
I dislocated one shoulder.
The other one's fine. But yeah, I had to go through this whole 2-stage process to get them fixed, and they look great. But yeah, no, it's not. It's by no means a medical justification. So again, what is the line? What is
right. But I'm sure, like, amongst lay people, when you if you were to tell them that's why you did it, I don't think anybody would have any judgment about. I'm talking out my ass here.
It really depends. Yeah.
I would imagine that for most people, that's considered a very acceptable reason to do that.
Yeah, surely. Even there's a plastic surgeon in the Tits Up book, because part of what she does is she sits in on a breast augmentation surgery and she sort of interviews them while they're doing it and speaks. It's one of my favorite chapters of this book. It's so interesting. But it's funny, she sort of slips away from the plastic surgeons and goes to speak to the anesthesiologist. And even the anesthesiologist is like, this is a vanity thing. Like, if you, she's like, a reduction that's necessary, is asymmetry, tubular breasts, all of these things, those are good reasons. Otherwise, you're just aiming at a moving target. And I'm just like, even today, even somebody in the room helping someone literally just get breast implants is still going to pass judgment about it. So this is something, again, does anything ever really change? No, it does not. So back to our 1950s ladies who want bigger boobies. Surgeons keep trying to do like the grafts and the fat transfers, and no matter what, it doesn't work because the body keeps wanting to reabsorb the fat. Enter Robert Allen Franklin.
Great name.
Right? In August of 1953, there is an article in Pageant, which is a Sunday newspaper supplement, kind of like Parade. And there is an article titled "The Operation That Remolds Flat-Chested Women." And just kind of like the ad at the bottom of a website, like, try this one weird trick to remove belly fat. Like, very, like, vibes are the same. And it's all about this new and inventive technique, which was essentially the first synthetic breast implant invented by this pretty shady doctor, Robert Allen Franklin, out of, get ready for it, surgical foam.
Cool. Dare I ask, what is surgical foam?
It's basically polyurethane.
It's insulation.
Great.
It's couch cushions. But medical grade. Now, the medical establishment was not about it because mainly they should not be hearing about this surgery for the first time in the insert next to the Sunday funnies, right? The surgery didn't seem to go through any major medical trials to ensure its safety. They called Franklin's credentials into question, and he responds with like, they're just jealous. They're jealous of me, and they're being judgmental because it's cosmetic and not medical. But again, like, what's the line? Now, as you can imagine, putting supposed medical grade couch cushions into your tits is not the move. They harden. There was an increased risk of cancer. Sometimes they straight up shrank. Another complication, trigger warning, gross, came from something that is a common sort of like, I don't want to say side effect, but something that happens when you get breast implants, which is the capsule. Basically, the breast creates a capsule of scar tissue around the implant. This is actually something that this is the most common cause of complications when you get breast implants because it's called capsular contracture. It can shrink or harden. It can deform the breast. The best way I heard it described was a baseball in a sock, which is not the look anyone's going for. And it's a relatively easy fix. It's surgical. You have to remove the capsule. Sometimes you have to replace the implant. But would either of you like to guess what happens when the implant is made of foam and not a smooth shell?
I'm guessing it like falls apart.
Does it explode?
No, the tissue grows into the foam.
Oh.
So the
what in the David Cronenberg?
Yeah. So it's not like it's not just like a random, it's like the tissue forms a scar. Your breast forms a scar around the implant to sort of isolate it.
So now you're talking about removing something that is like connected
attached to your body.
Like fucking Velcro.
And made of your body tissue. That's
exactly. Gross. It grows into the porous material and it makes removing it become incredibly difficult. But when he was asked to defend his strange invention, he points to the markets. This is a huge trend in breast history and cosmetic surgery throughout the 20th century, capitalism and market trends. If women are being shown that the women who are considered to be the most beautiful and glamorous women in the world have these hourglass figures with fuller breasts, they're going to start finding ways to achieve that. If a girdle ain't doing it, surgery is another option for people who can afford it. And so surgeons try to come up with a solution. We've reached the point of injecting liquid silicone.
Okay. Can we all just agree that Teeny from Now and Then had it right with the fucking balloons filled with pudding?
It's safe. It's natural.
And you got a snack if you're ever like on an island.
This, you know what's so funny that you mentioned that, because and again, we're coming back to the theme of like, what are women willing to endure? And as somebody who wore a falsie on one side to even herself out, it's not better. It's not more like this idea of wearing falsies or stuffing your bra or wearing some like chicken cutlets. You are just as self-conscious of being found out about that as you are about being found out about however you feel about your breasts. So like, I get the idea of like, because it doesn't help. It is entirely cosmetic, and you are always, you can't wear those to the beach. You can't, if you are getting intimate with someone and the bra comes off, it's like, oh, by the way, no part of this is authentic. And it's more embarrassing than being like, oh, by the way, they're not real, but they're also not imaginary. Like, you know what I mean?
To be clear, zero judgment on anyone who is doing surgery to affirm their bodies in any way. I was just making a funny joke because I think about those pudding balloons more often than I can say.
Well, I heard you as pudding balloons are better than injecting liquid silicone.
Don't inject liquid silicone in your body, please.
100%.
Please don't inject like insulation into your titties. Don't do it.
Don't do that. But like, yeah, that is like, they interviewed a lot of women during like the 50s being like, why don't you just do this other option? And they're like, because it's just like, I'd rather do this than, deal with the embarrassment of a falsie falling out.
Something you have to do every day and think about versus something you do once and then you hopefully don't have to think about it anymore.
Right. You have to think about everything you're wearing. The undergarments you're going to choose if you're modifying anything. Yeah. Like that's such a stress. It's a stress and a strain that's invisible, which is so much of what we're talking about is all of this invisible labor we're constantly being asked to do. And I just wanted to say one other thing, which is like, you said something about the anesthesiologist saying it's a moving target. And there was one part of me that was like, as fucked up as their judgment was, which should not be present, they are right that like, we are in a constant state of this moving target that we cannot achieve unless you are anointed the it thing of the moment. And then you have like a brief period in the sun and then it changes again.
Yeah. And if you're not the it thing, you're trying to make it happen.
Desperately.
You're trying so
Desperately.
much to make it happen. So in the book Venus Envy, A History of Cosmetic Surgery, great title. The author is historian Elizabeth Haken. She writes, if penicillin was the wonder drug of American medicine at mid-century, silicones were a wonder product of the American industry. And she goes on to mention several like medical uses for silicone, like replacing a damaged urethra, which is horrifying to think about, or for like medical shunts, like medical grade silicone is, very useful. Now, in case it is not, again, blatantly obvious, injecting liquid silicone without anything to contain it is a bad idea. If it is injected in liquid form, it migrates. It gets hard, it gets lumpy, it can mask breast cancer. Also, due to the cost, you can imagine there were plenty of back alley quacks using toxic substances that were not medical grade silicone. This can lead to issues.
Still a problem today.
This leads to issues like gangrene, infection, and then would require amputation. Quick note, modern day silicone implants have silicone that is cohesive, meaning that it's kind of more solid than liquid. And if the implant ruptures, the gel doesn't want to migrate. It wants to stick together kind of like a stress ball, just for safety concerns, anybody who's out there considering this surgery. It wasn't until 1962 that the first envelope basically was invented to contain the silicone, giving us what we now think of as the traditional breast implant, where a smooth shell contains the silicone gel. And the first true augmentation with silicone implants like this were first performed in the early 1960s. So all of a sudden, women of all ages and backgrounds are now having their breasts enlarged. There was finally a new option. Now, to be clear, there were and still are complications when it comes to breast implants. You have the aforementioned capsular contracture, which is the most common. There is the loss of sensation. There is numbness. There is rupture. There is the not more sort of common but not well understood breast implant illness, which is not a specific diagnosis, but from all the research that I have done on it, it seems to be like an autoimmune or inflammatory reaction to implants, leading some doctors to be like, should we test people for certain reactions to implants before we go through the surgery to see how their body is actually going to respond? It's not super common, but it's common enough for a lot of people to be like, oh, we have all had the same sort of reaction to this surgery, right?
A foreign body.
Yeah. Now, how implants differ culturally. I found this super interesting. So in the 70s, as the surgery is ramping up, it was noted by a West Coast plastic surgeon that women wanted breasts that were 25 to 30% larger than women on the East Coast, which I think is very funny. They want bigger boobies on the beach. Yeah, 100%. 100%. In the 90s, we get this sort of bigger is better look, this Pamela Anderson, Playboy, porn stars. And I think it's important to note that there was a ban on silicone implants from 1992 to 2006. So that means that the implants that a lot of people saw were saline. And saline implants, they can look great, but if you're not starting with enough breast tissue, they are the ones that look like the Agnes Sorel Rocky Hard, big spheres on your chest.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I have a feeling this is purely my own opinion and total conjecture. But I think that a lot of people feel like they have a reaction to breast implants always looking fake because they saw the 90s saline overstuffed breast implant for so many years.
Also, I feel like I've had a lot of friends and family members have breast augmentation for a myriad of reasons. And one of the things I always hear plastic surgeons say, I've been in consultations with people, and they always say this thing where they're like, go bigger than you think you should. And that was especially, I feel like, in the early aughts in Los Angeles, ladies and gentlemen, there was a long-standing thing where a lot of plastic surgeons would encourage you to go bigger than you thought you wanted to go with the cc's, so the amount, the size of your implant, because they felt that they had so many people come in and ask for secondary surgeries because they wanted larger breasts. And I just think that was also a weird school of thought where we were in such applied time of yes, Playboy and the increasing access to pornography and this sort of shift in how we were viewing breasts at the time, that this idea of bigger was better. And so a lot of plastic surgeons were saying go bigger. go bigger. And even I have heard, I don't want to say this is like a common thing, but I have heard many people have experiences where their doctor did larger CCs than they requested because that was like their medical opinion.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, there's also something to be said too about like saying, oh, I want C's or I want D's. And it's like, you don't quite know generally what you want your silhouette to be, but a lot of that has to do with your frame. And a lot of it has to do with what you're already working with and what your surgeon thinks looks right and what you're willing to put up with. So making that decision is really hard because it's not the kind of thing that you can get done. And it's the only person who can make adjustments in the moment is your plastic surgeon. You can't be like, you're asleep. You are not awake for this.
But this is the thing too, is like their aesthetic is the ultimate final judgment essentially in the room, which is like a little like, I don't want to say it's scary because like, you know, you don't go to the dentist and tell them where to drill, but like you also have to like, I mean, I think this is anything with cosmetic surgery now, or even what are being charmingly referred to as tweakments. So like injectables, Botox, filler, like you need to like the aesthetic of the person and trust the person who is injecting you.
Yeah. You have to look at their work, which I think back to my breast reduction, and I've had a female surgeon do it, and she was wonderful, and she gave her opinion, and she basically, gave me what she said she was going to do. But there was no Instagram back then to like look at examples of somebody's work, which I feel like today is a very, I've gotten Botox, I've gotten a little bit of filler. I was able to look at thousands of Instagram pictures to see, oh, this person really does this kind of overdone look. I don't think I'm going to go to them for my lip filler or what have you. This person, all of her patients look really natural. I'm going to go to her. I think back to like the 90s and early 2000s before we had this, and it's like really hard to, I don't know if doctors, like somebody who's older and remembers, tell me, like, did doctors have like binders at the office where you could look at their work?
Yep.
Yes.
I mean, fun fact, a lot of websites for plastic surgeon's office have before and afters all over the website.
Right.
For the last 18 years that I've had mine, have been on the website. They are very proud of mine.
They look great. She showed me them once. But I remember going in with friends. I desperately, listen, listeners, I think everyone should do whatever the fuck they want with their body at any point. Like, great. I had to work a lot on my own kind of body acceptance things. I still work on that today. But I remember going with friends for nose jobs and breast jobs and like wanting both of them so badly when I was younger. And now, and frankly, I'm just a wuss and too scared and like too much of a control freak. And I haven't gotten it done. And it's an interesting thing to kind of be in those rooms and wonder if like, but what will that look like on me?
Yeah,
it's
100%.
It's really hard to trust someone else's aesthetic. You really have to do your due diligence.
And another big part of this too is this idea of like conspicuous consumption. This is another like how implants differ culturally, of whether you want them to look obviously enhanced or natural. And as a matter of fact, British working class women and Brazilian women, anybody who is coming from a place of lower working class or poverty, having obviously enlarged breasts is kind of like carrying a designer bag. It is a choice to have non-natural looking breasts, because it's this idea of like, if you watch Succession, like the capacious bag, the ludicrously capacious bag, the idea of like money talks but wealth whispers. This is a symbol of financial achievement and accomplishment to have like obviously enhanced breasts. You think of somebody like Dolly Parton, who is like the queen of the obviously enhanced breast.
It costs a fortune to look this cheap.
Exactly.
Right.
And nowadays in the US, women go to surgeons who specialize in the natural look. These are women who don't want to look like they've had anything done because they don't want to be seen as frivolous or vain. And again, we have this thing happen over and over and over again. It's like, and this Miami plastic surgeon was like, nothing we do is natural. We dye our hair, we wear makeup and bras. Natural means letting nature run its course, and no one comes into my office to do that. So we are constantly having this tension between wanting to look a certain way, either to meet beauty standards for ourselves, for the world. If you're more attractive, you literally get paid more. There have been studies on this. So like, and there was another one who said, my mission here is restorative, to give her back the breast she had before she got pregnant. She just wants her identity back. But like your identity, like these things, these inherent feminine traits are so much a part of our identity. And so having them, not having them, changing them, whether or not people know we change them, the vanity surrounding them, it's just a constant struggle. And I think it's so interesting that when we talk about, does anything ever really change? No, it does not. The situation surrounding them might, like the culture around them might, but we are still, even if we like applaud people like Dolly Parton, like Cher, like anyone else who proudly talks about their cosmetic surgery, that is still an outlier. It was amazing when I was doing research for my own surgery, how many normal, just like everyday women, myself included, just happen to have some breast implants, but you would never know because a lot of times they look totally natural. It's only when they're like obviously enhanced do you actually really notice, right?
It makes me think about how, like, I feel like I've been seeing this a lot lately. Maybe my algorithms have just like are so aware of what we're doing right now. But I feel like I keep seeing all these things of, men didn't realize she was wearing makeup. Men don't realize she blow dries her hair. And it is traditionally like cis straight white men.
Yeah, men have not known that I had implants. Men have not known after they've had an experience with them.
Hot. But I just think like, it's so interesting because we're consuming all of this effort like water all the time. I feel like I keep saying it's like water, like oxygen, but we're consuming people modifying to the standard, and we're always trying to do this effortlessly, inconspicuously. Not always, but often. I think the vast majority of people are trying to kind of show a certain amount of effort, and it is so interesting how much of that effort again is silent or invisible. And I just think like, right, we dye our hair, we tint our lashes, you pluck your eyebrows, shave your legs, put on self-tanner, I mean, Jesus, I put on fake freckles not long ago, and I'm exceptional at it. I'm not going to lie, you guys, I've gotten very good. But I fully did it because I was like, I look old and haggard, and I just want something that makes me fake that I'm young and like went to the beach this month. And like,
1,000%.
That's insane.
It is, but it also isn't. Like, I think it is funny to say that it's insane, but it's also just it's just a part of our culture. It's just what we do. Nobody is fully 100% natural all the time. Well, there are a few people, but like...
Listeners, I'm not wearing any makeup right now, and you can't see that. Thank God. But I have very fair features and eyelashes, and when I don't wear mascara, people often are like, you okay? You sick? No. I'm not okay. I'm never okay.
None of us are okay.
Have you read the news?
I wanted to share like one more sort of thought. This is a quote from Orange is the New Black that I have thought about. It's one of those things that just lived in my brain, because something that comes up a lot in Tits Up and in the history of the breast and in all of this research that I was doing was this idea of a woman's femininity being a source of power. This was exceptionally interesting during the chapter about sex work, about strippers, which is sensational. Cannot recommend this book enough. So good. Again, NSFW, this book. I was reading this book on my downtime at my job, and I had to keep like covering up pages, and I had to take the jacket off because there's a lot of just exceptional pictures of breasts. They're all fantastic. But there's a lot of boobs in this book. But this idea of breasts having commercial value and power, and this idea of femininity. I'm trying to find, where was the sensational quote? Oh, here we go. This is from one of the plastic surgeons that she interviews. And she says, I don't see women who are making choices as victims. Women need to use the power they have. Cleopatra, Helen of Troy, Nefertiti, their beauty contributed to their influence. It's silly to turn your back on your allure. Destroying one of the few powers you have is not strategic, which I think is really interesting. So there's that quote, and it made me think of this quote from Orange is the New Black. This is from an episode where Red, played by the great Kate Mulgrew, has been pretending to be in love with a CO in order to get what she wants. And he finds out that she's been faking it, basically. And she says, you take a woman's power away, her work, her family, her currency. You leave her with one coin, the one she was born with. It may be tawdry and demeaning, but if she has to, she will spend it. And that has sort of stuck with me through this entire the entire research. I keep writing in all of my notes, the one coin, the one coin, the one coin. It's that inherent power and value that we have in this essential element of our femininity, in either the ways that it affirms us. We do it the way that it affirms our gender. If you're somebody who feels that that it does not affirm your gender and you need to change it about yourself, like this idea of this idea of your femininity being your power and being it. That quote is a very sort of post-feminist quote, right? It's this idea of like, we got this one thing in our back pocket and I will use it if I have to. I just thought that was a really interesting insight into this entire conversation about why we care so much about them and why we want them to look a certain way. Because I think there is a built-in power that we have with our femininity. I don't know. What do y'all think?
What it brings to mind for me is that like so many of these beauty standards and gender expectations, like we can disagree with them. We can wish they weren't true. We can want to not participate in them, but we can't change the fact that they like materially affect the world we live in. Mm-hmm. That we are not exempt from the effects of having breasts or not wearing makeup or not shaving our legs, like whatever. You can make any choice you want, but we don't yet get to live in a society where that choice is free of repercussions. And so I think, this to me is like, like I disagree with the fact that we have to play this game or that sometimes we have to use this currency, but we still live in a society where sometimes that's the only currency that's accepted.
Mm-hmm. I think about like, I had a boss once and I remember I was like 22, 23 maybe at the time. And she was probably in her late 30s, I think. And very, very beautiful, like former model, 6 feet tall, gorgeous, and like had the most subtle work done and was always telling me about how the biggest currency, she said this thing and she was like, men wield in money and power and women wield in youth and beauty, and never let anyone tell you that that's not true. And I remember at the time being like, oh my God, like that's so not feminist. And now as I've gotten older, I'm like, she wasn't telling me that as though that were a positive thing. Right. She wasn't telling me that like, oh, you should really, she was like, don't let people fucking lie to you that youth and beauty are not how you are being judged as you move through the world.
And people don't even know they're doing it. I would say
it's so ingrained.
In most cases, it's not even like malevolent, superficial, sexist people. It's just people who aren't like thinking about their biases.
Yeah, you have to train yourself not to.
Yeah, so we all do. We do it to other women
all the time. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the things I was thinking about as we were entering this episode is like, right now I feel like one of the trends I'm seeing that's really popular in capital F fashion is wearing like very sheer, very tight tank tops or tops in general without a bra. Mm-hmm. And it's for often very small breasted women, of which I am a member, but I have had a baby. And also I no longer live a life where I feel comfortable moving about the cabin, if you will, without a bra in like a thin shirt. I like don't want to run into someone I've worked with or a family member or anything like that. Like I don't personally feel comfortable that way. And I was like, well, that is a signaling that I am no longer young. I am no longer of a youth, quote unquote. Like, and it was something so small where I was like, oh, well, I don't want to wear no bra and like show my nipples to everyone who I pass. Like, and then I was like, oh, that's also me saying that I'm no longer cool.
It's a sobering day when you realize you no longer have the 20-year-old it girl nipples.
Oh, I never had. It's so funny talking to people about like going braless because that has never been an option for me. I went from extremely uneven to big old boobies that should not go without a bra. Like if I don't wear a bra, I'm gonna take someone's eye out.
I had about a 10-minute window where I could go braless because I had very large, heavy breasts that I had reduced when I was 16. And then I was like a C cup for a minute. And then they kind of filled out into a D. And it's like, they're not anywhere near as big as they were, but they are today bigger than I wanted them to be. And I think part of that is just aging, weight gain, gravity, et cetera. I think even when I had my youthful breasts, like I had a breast type where like going braless with a sheer top would have looked straight up pornographic.
Yeah.
Like it would not have been admissible.
And that's the thing, right? Like whose nipples are admissible, whose are allowed. Like
You're
certainly
right, these nipples are not admissible.
But I remember breastfeeding and it would have been so much easier to go braless and it wasn't because it felt pornographic. Also, when you're breastfeeding, no one tells you this. I mean, I guess some people do now with the internet, but your nipples get huge and they get dark and they get weird. And you're just, it's like suddenly you're in the dark crystal. Like it's so Jim Henson what happens to your body.
We could do another whole episode about nipples.
Like on another whole episode. But
honestly.
like, I do find it to be fascinating the way trends dictate what we want breasts to look like. Like I said, I was so happy when sort of, especially pre-baby, like that 70s summer vibe was in because I was like, yes, my titties are here. They have their moment to shine. Like I have never had like big apple boobies. They have never been high and like, bouncy.
Do y'all remember the pencil trick? Are we all aware of the pencil
where you
rule?
put it under your breasticle?
If the pencil falls out from under your boob, you can go braless. And if the pencil stays tucked under your boob, you cannot go braless.
Yeah.
I'd love to know who came up with this.
Malarkey.
I have never passed the pencil test. I have always kept that pencil right up in there. And in fact, I do keep all of my pencils there.
that's just my pencil case.
Yeah,
I mean, throughout my pubescence, I was able to keep a pencil under one side and the other one, nope. Solid nope. No crease, not a one. Well, kids, this is the end of this particular episode about breasts. I'm sure more will come. Wow. I'm sure there's I cannot tell you, there is so much to say about this. And I slogged through so much research about the history of boobs before I was like, I think I want to talk about how we alter our bodies and how we have the options we have to change the shape of our breasts and what it means to live up to certain beauty standards in the moment, because otherwise, again, we could do an entire podcast just about the history of boobs.
Oh my gosh, they changed from 1 unit to 2.
Yeah. All right, kids. It's been fun. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. I hope that you think differently about your boobs and maybe you're a little less judgmental about what other people decide to do with their bodies. And that's our show. Thank you so much for listening. If you like this episode, please tell your friends and be sure to follow us on social media at Vanity Veritas Pod. We will be back in 2 weeks. And in the meantime, remember, trends come and go, but vanity is timeless.